Hello and welcome to the video lecture on designing fields using lookups. So here what we're trying to do is if you're storing data, right, there are chances that you have some data that will change. We talked about that when we talked about normalization. We talked about that with designing tables. And we said, you know what, we can have anomalies happen when we have duplicated data. So for instance, if we look at the product table in its original sense, and when we looked up product finish, we saw that we have values like birch, maple, and oak. And then we might see that here we've replaced them with letters. So the idea of this is that I'm just storing a code. Now the code, again, is like a system-generated key. It has nothing to do with reality. There is no reason for me to change it whatsoever. But the values birch, maple, and oak may change, right? So something that's oak, the industry term might change for finishes. And if we had to go through and change all of our historical data, we would have to go back and run a process to make sure we changed all of those finishes that were oak, that were repeated perhaps hundreds of times. We would have to run a process to ensure that we updated all of those records. In this case, we just have a product finish lookup table, and if we needed to change the finish, we would just change the one value in the one record associated with oak, which has a code of C, and we would change it to whatever we needed to change it to. So only the code is being actually stored as a foreign key in the product table. So now the product finish table becomes the parent table, and the product table is now the child of the product finish, because we've got a one. Now this becomes a one-to-many between product finish and product, whereas the product finish values can be used multiple times in the product table. Now this may have come out of the design process when we were doing our normalization. It may have come from our designers, just out of their expertise. They may have decided to use this. Now, the other thing that this does is it saves space. So instead of actually storing 3 letters for oak, all I'm doing is storing 1 letter in the product finish. So disk space wise, this is going to be a lot more efficient than storing the product finish values in the product table. The code's going to be a lot more efficient. They're going to prevent us from having update anomalies when we need to change the product finish values. And again, the disk space savings, it can be enormous. The cost of this is the performance associated with doing the lookup. So when I'm on product 100 and I see that it's a chair, when I need to see what the actual product finish is, I have to go and I have to do a lookup. There's processing time associated with that. So you take a performance hit when you do something like this. But again, in a lot of scenarios, this is a great way to work, and we're probably going to be doing this in a lot of your projects. So this is one way of one aspect of designing fields that you really need to keep in mind as you're designing your database. And that's the end of that lecture.